Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. Just curious, what do you think is the best training and nutrition approaches for someone who has detrained for a couple of years and is around 25 to 30% if they want to minimize muscle loss while losing fat as fast as possible? Cheers, Jason. And I kind of think the thing that I pointed out further down, and you guys see part of that, those are contradictory goals. In other words, people who are thinking in terms of improving body composition instead of pure weight loss really shouldn't be thinking of losing fat as fast as possible. Like that really shouldn't be even on your radar. And I know people say, but that's what I want. It's like, well, how do I say this politely? You know what? You probably would love to have a threesome with your two favorite actresses and have $10 million in the bank also, right? You would really like that too, most of you guys out there, right? You would really, really, really like that. Okay? Just like you would really like to lose fat as fast as possible without losing muscle. Okay? That's where we're at with this. I mean, that would be awesome, wouldn't it? Now let's come over to the real world. In the real world, no one's going to give you $10 million for free. Your two favorite actresses are never going to have a threesome with you. And you are not going to lose fat as fast as possible without losing significant amounts of muscle mass. Again, barring using copious amounts of anabolics. Why do you think these clowns who come up on social media and put out their drug stacks who aren't that big use so much gear with all these fat burners with the lower calories? Why do you think they're running like 2 grams of gear? And some of these guys are under 200 pounds because that's what it takes to lose fat that quickly and keep the muscle you have. So what you need to be thinking of in terms of how slowly can I lose body fat while still being happy with my rate of fat loss. Okay, lose the other mindset. Now, that means you need to train hard, big movements. Think in terms of overall stress on your body. Now, you're detrained, so you can come in and run any basic novice program. You don't have to worry about training fatigue and all of that to the same degree. You just need to get on a basic program that utilizes big, heavy barbell movements. You should probably do a little bit of metabolic conditioning work, and you should jack your protein up as high as possible. That's what's going to give you pretty quick fat loss while hopefully recompositioning you. Okay, that's what you need to do. Run a fairly modest deficit. Because at the end of the day, the faster you lose body fat, the more muscle you are going to lose. And that's just a simple reality. You're not going to get around that fact. The leaner you are, the more muscle you lose at the same deficit. The lower your protein is, the more muscle you lose at the same deficit. So in a perfect world, you would run a fairly small deficit and focus on gaining muscle. And you'd gain it through big, big movements with progressive overload, because you've detrained. You would do metabolic conditioning to create a cardio that has an anabolic type effect, and you would just push your energy turnover up while sending all these anabolic signals in your body, and you would protein overfeed. General rule, if you're trying to quickly shift body composition like that, particularly in a deficit, more protein is better. People say, well, how much? Right, let me come over and make that statement again. More protein is better in that case. What does your budget allow for? What does your appetite allow for? That's what determines how much. It's more is better in that case. Protein is expensive, and protein can become unpalatable. That's your problems with it. Another 200 grams is always better than another 20 for that purpose. As crazy as that sounds. Okay, that's truth to it. Palatability and the financial cost is the downside. Basically, no one wants to sit around eating 5 pounds of chicken breast every day to get 500 grams of protein. So think in those terms. All right, next question. How do you choose max effort exercises in a basic gym without different bars, racks, bands, or chains? You know, I answered this and I picked this question before I saw the word racks. You're not going to do anything without racks. Like, what? You're not going to run conjugate without racks. Now, as to the other point, bands, as I've said, I make all my clients buy bands who go on conjugate. If you can't afford $100 for a really high-end quality band set, that you can take to the gym that are going to last you a full year. You can't afford a gym membership and you can't afford a coach or any of that anyways. You probably can't even afford the food to gain muscle, okay? High-end bands are cheap. I'm not talking about the $20 band set you bought off Amazon. I'm talking about like Rogue bands. Right? Perfect example. All right? Even the really high-end ones are not that expensive. You need to have bands. Not optional. I even did whole videos showing you how to set them up. If you can't find a gym with a rack, that needs to be a higher priority too. Okay? You have to have racks to train. Just to train at all. Unless you're going to do purely floor exercises. So, over to what would you do if you only have an Olympic bar. So that's what we're talking about. Lack of chains, lack of specialty bars. All right. Well, think in terms of the average gym if you wanted to do different presses. How many presses could you come up with? Well, you could do bench press, right? You could do closed grip bench press. That's 2. You could do dead pin presses off the bench. Now, I'm not telling you to do rep work. This is max effort work. I'm not telling you to bounce it off the bottom and then lift it. That's the difference. Okay, there's a big difference between starting at the top and bouncing off pins, or which would also include doing 2 reps would be bouncing off pins. If you start at the bottom, right at ½ inch off your chest or off your chest because you arch up and you're still stopping on the pins to basically make a deadlift type bench, you press that up and then set it back down on the pins without it banging, hopefully. Okay, that's different than bouncing off pins for reps or hitting the pins. All right, that's a max. All right, dead pin bench. You could do it with closed grip too. We're now up to 4 exercises on the flat bench alone. 4 exercises right there for max effort work. About a floor press, about a closed grip floor press, 6 exercises. The strict standing press, 7 exercises. Incline bench, incline closed grip bench, 9 chest exercises. They got a decline bench. You do wide grip, you do closed grip. That's 11. We're up to 11 max effort presses, exercises you can max out on using stuff that almost every gym has with just a basic barbell. That's 11. That's before we go to bands. That's before we come up with anything exotic. That's just all easily off the top of my head. So you tell me how you come up with this stuff. How about deadlifts? Okay. How about sumo? How about standing on plates to create a deficit sumo? How about rolling some mats over something that you can set it on, any sort of block to create a block pull that's just a couple inches off the floor? All right, we've got 3 exercises off the sumo deadlift. You do the same thing with conventional? You can. That's 6 different deadlifts. Easily. Just by using sumo conventional adjusting block heights versus deficits. And then you could also even rotate the size of the deficits. Rotate the size of the block pulls. I mean, 2 inches difference in range of motion is pretty big. That's a different exercise at that point. It is a different exercise. You can pretty quickly come up with 8, 9, 10 different deadlifts, but 6 is easy. Right? You guys see where I'm going with this? It's pretty easy. And if your gym has any specialty bars, not a problem. It's not that hard to come up with them. Bands and chains give you an enormous number of tools. Specialty bars give you an enormous number of tools. When you have access to all that stuff, we can literally come up with 30 different max effort squats, 30 different max effort presses. So you could go almost a year without even repeating the same ones. That's the point. All right, next question. Hey coach, I am a novice lifter. I work full-time with shift work. I don't have time to spend 2 hours in the gym. Any changes I can make to your novice program that would help? 3x10 instead? No, that's not gonna, no. Nope. If you don't have that sort of time to do a full body program, you're gonna need to run split program. You're gonna need to run an upper lower. Okay, that's one of the things I point out to people too. As much as I might like full body for novice lifters, in order for someone who's not a total rank early novice to really get the training volumes they need on a full body routine, it's relatively time consuming, especially because a lot of people feel the need to do a bunch of warm-up sets and everything else. You're doing like 5 different big exercises a lot of times. Okay, you're not going to do that if you have a very short time window. So you need a certain amount of training volume in. I would much rather see you at that point go to an upper lower, because then you can at least get a 5x5 or something in on 2 big lifts and then a supplemental lift, right? Right? That's the idea. So if you had to do that because you don't have the time, you could walk in and do, even as a novice, a 5x5 bench. You could do a 5x5 barbell row and bunch sets 10 on the overhead press, right? You could do that. You could do that. And then you could do some chin-ups at home if you need to. So that's kind of the whole point. If you're in a situation to where you really only have time to do up to 5 sets of 3 different exercises, tops, because again, you don't have to deal with multiple warm-ups for different lifts because you're only doing 3. If your time limits are what affect you, you might as well go to an upper lower at that point so that you can get in 4 days a week and get that training volume in that you need, and it's just going to be twice a week in terms of spreading it out versus the other. And if you're worried about muscle protein synthesis due to the lower frequency, you can always do a little bit of Metcon work at home, things like that, right? Do a bunch of chin-ups and come back and tell me it doesn't keep your upper body growing, right? Do some step-ups. Do some box jumps at home, right? Problem solved. Problem solved. But that's the direction I would go. If time is a limiting factor, you're really not going to be able to do an appropriate full body. You're not going to make the maximum gain. So you might as well at that point go ahead and split it up and get maximum muscle growth per session, at least for half of the body. You're better off doing that and just getting in one more time every week. And I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.